Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell appears to be flipping his own script, also known as flip-flopping, when it comes to filling a Supreme Court vacancy in an election year. Here's what he said yesterday.
If the Supreme Court justice was to die next year, what would you do?
We'd fill it.
Enough said. Joining us now, Joe Lockhart, former Clinton White House press secretary, Margaret Talev, senior White House correspondent for Bloomberg, and John Avlon, CNN senior political analyst. So, Joe, there he was quite clear he'd feel it. He didn't feel that way, obviously, when President Obama was president, but now he does.
Well, yeah, listen, I don't think McConnell's flip-flopping at all, because it never was about a principle. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the principle he articulated.
Right, sure.
The principle it is about is power, and McConnell has become symbolic of the sort of amoral politician that we have in our country right now, that will say anything at any point in order to pursue their own goals. Because hypocrisy no longer has a heavy price. Mitch McConnell could not care less what we're saying about him here this morning. We could call him every name in the book and it wouldn't bother him, because he has power. And only when that power is taken away, when he becomes minority leader, will it get his attention.
Yeah, this isn't a problem for Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell it's a problem for people who have tried to find some precedent or justification for what Mitch McConnell did, other than he did it because he could.
Yes.
Right? And that's the issue. It's a problem for people like Lindsey Graham, who is now the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who said this past October.
If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
We've held
the tape.
We've held the tape, and we'll see whether Lindsey Graham, as chairman of the Judiciary Committee's word means anything. But generally, power trumps principle, as we've seen over and over. And there's an assumption that people have short memories. There's actually a contempt for consistency, and that's tone comes from the top. Hypocrisy is no longer the unforgivable sin in politics, because Donald Trump does it all the time and doesn't matter. And there's an assumption that, the base won't care and everyone else will forget, so take what you can while you can, and that's how democracy starts to die.
Well, Democrats haven't forgotten, Margaret. The 2020 candidates were talking about this hypocrisy yesterday on the campaign trail.
Well, he also said he will fill it, but that actually is the job of the President of the United States, not Mitch McConnell. So we also have to do a little history about the division of responsibilities between the United States Congress and the executive branch.
I've argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I want to believe that it's a non-political organization and that politics are checked at the door of the courthouse. But when you're seeing things like that and hearing things from Senator McConnell, that's no longer the case, and we could and should do better.
Wait, that train left the station.
Margaret, your thoughts?
Well, Senator McConnell would, and his team would tell you that he has been consistent, that he's not really being a hypocrite, because there was always an asterisk next to what he said, which was that if the Senate was controlled by the opposing party, that would be the rule, not if the Senate was controlled by the same party and now the Senate is controlled by the same party as the president. That is like a distinction for argument's purposes. But politically speaking, Democrats aren't going to recognize that distinction. So what you have is his position now is going to create both reinforced support for him on the Republican side and create a jumping off point for a new debate on the Democratic side. McConnell's position works fine for him unless voters decide to revolt against this, and it affects
Kentucky
or in the next presidential election. And so I think you're starting to see some tension lines around the issue of abortion, for example, and the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court may be at least a big point of debate and perhaps a driver of votes in the general election. But for now, McConnell's position is predicated on the idea that it will not be, that this will all be about the economy, and that for Republicans, some of whom are uncomfortable with several of the positions Donald Trump has taken or ways he's conducted himself, that it has all been worthwhile for many Republicans because it has allowed them to create a lot of permanent or long-term slots in the judiciary for like-minded conservatives. So if that's the game for McConnell, then you guys are exactly right. He's not concerned about what we're saying on this panel this
That's
morning.
the game. Checkmate.
And that's Joe's problem, which is that, Joe, historically, that Republicans vote on the Supreme Court and Democrats don't as much.
Right. Yeah, but I think Margaret makes a good point there that I think abortion has become a much bigger issue in this campaign than Mitch McConnell was counting on. I think, traditionally he's not reflecting history very well. When the economy is weak, the economy is front and center. When the economy is strong, very often social issues come to the fore because people are satisfied with the economy. And I think Republicans are vastly underestimating the power of women, particularly Republican women, who see what's happening in Georgia, Alabama, Missouri as overreach, and overreach that's being protected by exactly the Mitch McConnell strategy of packing the courts with young, anti-Roe v. Wade conservatives.
Let's talk about what happened last night with Justin Amash. So Congressman Justin Amash of Michigan is the first Republican, only Republican, to publicly say that he sees impeachable offenses in the Mueller report. So the big question was, what's going to happen when he has to confront his constituents in Michigan? He had this town hall, and we were waiting to see what the reaction to him would be. He ended up getting a standing ovation. Here's what he said during this about other Republicans.
By the way, a lot of them think I'm right about the Mueller report, and they just won't say it. There are a lot of the Republicans.
All right, he went on. That was a little snippet.
And he went on. Look, Amash is a lonely libertarian who's been consistent with his principles. So he's come under fire from Donald Trump and the base. But you look at the standing ovation he got from his constituents last night. Take a look, listen to all of what he said. He basically said that many members of Congress, his colleagues, are too cowardly to actually tell the truth about what they think about Donald Trump. They're too afraid of the base to actually say what they think about what's happening in Washington. And he went on to say that cowardice, that hyperpartisanship, is not only making us stupid, it's hurting democracy because it's crippling our ability to reason together as a country. Those are important comments for people to listen to today.
I do want to bring up one other subject because this struck me last night. Seth Moulton, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts running for president, he's not number one in the polls right now. He's at the bottom of the pack.
He's 1%.
But he did something historic yesterday, which is acknowledge that he has been getting therapy for post-traumatic stress. He served in the Iraq War under David Petraeus, among others, and said that he had dreams, among other things, after, and he went and sought help. I don't know if we have a graphic of what he said, do we?
I can read some of it.
All right. I had some particular experiences or regrets from the war that I just thought about every day. And occasionally, I've had bad dreams or wake up in a cold sweat. But because these experiences weren't debilitating, I didn't feel suicidal or completely withdrawn. And I was doing fine in school. It took me a while to appreciate that I was dealing with post-traumatic stress and I was dealing with an experience that a lot of other veterans have. So Witten got help. He got help, which makes him, in a way, the first announced candidate for president, as far as we can tell, really ever to admit that he or she is getting regular therapy. He says he goes once a month. I think it's a moment in history. It's a refreshing moment in history.
It is a moment in history. And Margaret, he's doing so many people a favor by speaking publicly about that.
Yeah, this reflects two things. This reflects the sea change in kind of the way society deals with mental health issues and the plight of and the circumstances of returning veterans. I mean, just compare this with what you would have seen in the 1970s, with political candidates, but also with veterans returning home from war. It also reflects Seth Moulton's position in this very crowded field. I think if he were the number 1, 2, or 3 candidate, there would be a lot more calculation about how publicly to be comfortable speaking about this and how much to kind of game this out. And if nothing else, now this creates a window for him to really connect with voters and with veterans and with interesting parts of the Democratic Party and the electorate at large.
Remember, around the time he was born, Tom Eagleton got drummed out of the Democratic Party in a VP nomination because he admitted to mental illness and intense therapy. This is a sea change. This is heroic. And I think it actually increases his credibility as a candidate of generational change. He's got the courage to come out and talk about it.
John, Margaret, Joe, thank you all very much for that conversation.